So far, we've learned the basic story of Milton Friedman, the most influential economist of the modern era. Personally, I see Friedman as kind of an unsung villain in our history. But why have his ideas been so persistently sticky in the American body politic? What makes his notions about free markets so appealing to America's business and political classes? Friedman and the Austrians he followed saw themselves as rebels. The prevailing winds in the post-war, post-Depression era had shifted against their line of thinking. You see, the Great Depression had completely discredited the pro-business, free market economic theories that defined the Gilded Age and the Roaring Twenties. Franklin Roosevelt and the New Deal had transformed the nation's economy and the role government played in helping that economy function. But Friedman and his fellow counter-revolutionaries believed this change was a huge mistake, the beginning of an inexorable slide to totalitarianism. To Friedman, freedom was the ultimate goal, and the individual the ultimate entity in society. That is almost a direct quote from his book, Capitalism and Freedom. Friedman's heroes, Friedrich Hayek and Ludwig von Mises, believed that economic freedom was a means toward political freedom. As Friedman said, the fundamental threat to freedom is the power to coerce, be it in the hands of a monarch, a dictator, an oligarchy, or a momentary majority. The way he saw it, there were only two ways of coordinating an economy. One, through central planning by coercion, or two, voluntary cooperation of individuals in the marketplace. I sure know which one sounds better to me. If the choice is between Soviet diktat and my own voluntary trip to the jewels, it's no choice at all. If freedom means the free exchange of goods and services, what could possibly be wrong with that? The way Friedman paints the picture, we individuals are free to enter or not enter into any transaction as we please, because it's all strictly voluntary. It's like the title of another of Friedman's books. You are free to choose. If you wander into a store, no one forces you to buy anything. You are free to buy something there or go someplace else. Why, it's practically the most democratic thing in the whole world. Everything you purchase is like a vote. As he says, each man can vote, as it were, for the color of the tie he wants and get it. He does not have to see what color the majority wants and then, if he is in the minority, submit. Democracy, as defined by Friedman, was not the ability of the majority to make decisions, but the freedom that individuals had to make decisions for themselves. This was not meant to imply that democratic governance had no role to play. As Friedman says, the consistent liberal is not an anarchist. According to Friedman, government was essential for deciding the rules of the game and enforcing them. In this philosophy, protecting private property rights was absolutely essential to preserving freedom. As Hayek describes in The Road to Serfdom, the system of private property was the most important guarantee that exists for preserving freedom. By having a diffuse number of players control the means of production, no one would have complete control over what individuals could decide for themselves. Friedman amplified this idea, saying that when economic and political power are kept separate, economic power serves as a check and counter to political power. It was for these reasons that free markets were seen as necessary to have political freedom. True economic freedom required freedom from government intervention. To restrict the marketplace with regulations, licenses, or professional certifications was to impede freedom itself. According to Milton Friedman, profit-making was the ultimate essence of democracy. Therefore, any government that stood in the way of market forces was acting anti-democratically. Friedman and his Chicago School acolytes believed that the market was essentially a force of nature. Left to operate on their own, supply and demand, unemployment and inflation would eventually balance into equilibrium. Government regulation, trade barriers, taxing the rich to help the poor, these were all interruptions that distorted the natural balance of the marketplace. If the economy could be cleansed of all these things, the market would provide the best utility, maximum satisfaction for everyone. It wasn't just the best option, it was the only option. As Friedman described in 1980, there is no alternative way so far discovered of improving the lot of ordinary people. The free market system distributes the fruits of economic progress among all people. Any government that made the mistake of trying to fight inequality was actually doing more harm than good, you see. Inequality was actually not bad at all. Instead, according to Friedman, inequality was a sign of dynamic change, social mobility, equality of opportunity. Government do-gooders who hoped to reduce economic inequality were misguided because state help kills self-help. Or even more eloquently, a society that puts equality before freedom will get neither. A society that puts freedom before equality will get a high degree of both. If this idea that the marketplace has magical properties sounds familiar, it's for good reason. Friedman's central tenet that markets are, as critic Richard Phillips described, imbued with self-correcting mechanisms that impose reason on an otherwise chaotic process, goes all the way back to Adam Smith's invisible hand. Smith came up with those ideas around the same time the American Revolution was happening. It's just the same old idea, dressed up in modern clothes. And because Milton Friedman was a math genius, there were loads of complicated equations and calculus to make his free market theories appear as unquestionable as Newton's law of gravity. Markets are magic because math. Free market theory was primarily a rebranding of the old French name for the same philosophy, laissez-faire. You may remember hearing those words, laissez-faire, meaning let them do, in your American history class in high school. The basic idea amounts to leave business alone. They know what they're doing, so if we just let business do what they do best, we'll all be a lot better off. Friedman and Hayek and the rest weren't really reinventing the wheel, they were rehabilitating the economic theories that had helped John D. Rockefeller and J.P. Morgan become richer than European aristocracy. Friedman was even willing to embrace monopolies, just like good old Standard Oil in the late 19th century. He believed that a business monopoly should be seen as the ultimate reward for efficiency. Rescued from the dustbin of history, Friedman and company polished up laissez-faire and gave it a sharp new name, free markets. But Friedman wasn't just a wily recycler, he was truly an innovator. His ideas contributed to today's most dominant business philosophy, the maximization of shareholder value. The idea that stockholders are the most important players in the greater economy. More important than workers, customers, suppliers, the community, or any other possible stakeholders in a modern corporation. He did this with just one hugely influential essay in the New York Times Magazine titled "The Social Responsibility of Business is to Increase Its Profits." Friedman had it with notions that American business should have any kind of social responsibility to its workers or the communities they lived in. It wasn't business's job to care about operating ethically or giving customers a good deal or possibly driving suppliers out of business by making unreasonable demands. Such attitudes were tantamount to collectivism and a sure path to communism. According to Friedman, a capitalist enterprise should have one goal and one goal only: profit. He drives this point home by quoting himself, saying, "There's one and only one social responsibility of business: to use its resources and engage in activities designed to increase its profits." We can basically break down Milton Friedman's philosophy into 3 words: freedom, capitalism, America. In the UK, he would have said, freedom, capitalism, Britain. Marry freedom and capitalism to love of country, rinse, repeat. Tomorrow, I'll tell you how Milton Friedman convinced everyone that stockholders own a company and are more important than anyone else in society. In fact, helping them is what is necessary for the public good. In the meantime, please like, follow, favorite, and sign up for my free Substack. Let's make them pay. Wow, that was a long one, Lou. I want to trim that baby down a little.